As you must know by now, the world's greatest golf podcast, Golf Weekly, has made the move to Patreon. When you sign up, you're guaranteed a podcast every Thursday with extra episodes around the biggest tournaments of the year and interviews with golf's biggest names as well. You'll also become an official friend of the pod. You'll be able to chat to the lads, Joe, Nathan, Peter and Fiona on our Discord channel, which by the way is lit. You'll get invites to our golf days whenever we can all get back out there, and there'll be exclusive watch parties around the majors. Get on to otbsports.com/Golf Weekly and sign up now for $3.99 per month, or just search Golf Weekly on patreon.com. The page is live now. That's less than €1 a week. And Nathan is here to give us all the tepid takes that this is the low rent, the free version that you're going to give us here. It was okay.
The focus group.
I'll tell you, that Discord channel has been lit over the weekend. At one stage last night, there was a drinking game going on around the Sky commentary. There are many of the friends of the pod arranging meetups for when the golf courses reopen, and I'm a little bit concerned that in a couple of weeks' time, when the government make the decision about when golf can restart in this country, that if they say it can't restart, that if there's a riot on Grafton Street, there'll be a line at the end of the RTE News that it all started out on this little Discord community. Not much was known about it, of this secret community, but that, the old friends of the pod on Discord may have started it all. They're quite passionate over there, to put it mildly, but it's been brilliant over the past 4 or 5 weeks. The response and the engagement at about 11:30 on Friday night when Rory McIlroy missed the cut. He obviously made some very interesting remarks about Bryson DeChambeau. I looked on Discord and within 5 minutes there's about 100 people commenting on it. So we're all sort of doing the same thing, sitting on the couch for the weekend watching Sky Sports.
It's the homemade friend of the pod signs on cardboards that you want to watch out for at all of the future rallies.
Exactly. Dear God, it's like, Joe Malloy's head marching down Grafton Street. He is our leader.
Okay, let's move on. Shane Lowry found a bit of form?
Yeah, he needed it as well. Last week at Bay Hill, his putting was almost probably at an all-time low. His stats were pretty horrific, but this week he got it back. Thursday got himself into a bit of contention. Friday he said he had the same old problems with the putter, but played really well over the weekend. At one stage last night, he got to 9 under par. He was within 2 shots of the lead heading into the back 9, and a lot of scoreable holes early in that back 9. Didn't take advantage out of them. Probably ran out of a little bit of steam, but he finished in a tie for 8th. His putting was vastly, vastly improved over the past 4 days, and that is his best finish of the season so far. It's only the second time in the last year he's had a top 10, so it's been a struggle. He's living over in America. He's committed to spending a lot of time there at the moment. There's obviously a lot of travel issues at the moment, so his family are gone over as well. So this is a tough time. There's a lot of golf being played. He's away from the family quite a bit, and he hasn't looked particularly happy on the course over the last few weeks, but looked a different man last night in particular on that front nine when he got a bit of momentum going, and at the right time as well, because if his putter's hot, bearing out the stats at Arnie's place last week, from tee to green, he was as good as anybody. He was right up there, but it was just on the greens. He couldn't get anything flowing. And he's had those problems throughout his career with the putter of getting any sort of consistency. But we know at Lowry, he can perform at the biggest events. Like, it's incredible that he's won an Open Championship, a World Golf Championship, his home championship as an amateur. And there he is again contending at the Players. So it often feels like the bigger the occasion, the better Lowry performs. And we're within a month of the Masters, so it's a very good time to find a bit of form. He's heading to Augusta National this morning. What a life these guys lead. He himself and Neil Manship are going up alongside Lee Westwood and Lee's young son Sam for a couple of practice rounds. They were invited up by a member. Even as the Open champion, you need to be invited by a member of Augusta National. So they're going up there for a couple of days practice. Neil Manship has never played Augusta, so Shane is treating him for a couple of days, and a month out, it's the ideal preparation. But he's back then playing at the Honda Classic next week. It's a tournament and a venue where he lives just a couple of miles from in Florida. So don't be surprised if he backs it up next weekend.
Is this the Florida swing starting now, or is it everything?
No, we're well into the Florida swing now. We're a couple of weeks into the 4 weeks into the Florida swing at this stage. So yeah, he's at home. He can stay at home. He has the family close by. So that is something that's very important to Shane and his mindset. So he looks particularly happy at the moment. And the golf has been good for really since it restarted in July. Just week after week, it's been relentless in terms of drama, in terms of quality, in terms of brilliance of the winners, and it was just an added bonus then of Lowry in the mix last night.
That's interesting, because I think one of the reasons why it's been good is that there are now officially so many characters that the whole sport isn't being suppressed by the one superstar that has been there for so long and hanging over it. That actually, because Tiger has been gone for so long and then made his comeback, but is like clearly not going to be a factor on tour essentially ever again, it looks like at this stage, that so many characters have been forced to stand up. Like, so this weekend, for example, was supposed to be yesterday was supposed to be Bryson versus Westwood, but in the end, there was somebody coming from outside that duo to win the tournament, who has had his own dramas, and it's been it's fair to say a roller coaster period for Justin Thomas.
It has, and he's brought most of that on himself. Coming into 2021, he was there alongside Dustin Johnson in contention for being the best player in the world. He was on this ridiculous run, 7 top 12s in a row. He turns up at Hawaii again, performs well, but makes this inexplicable homophobic remark when he missed the putt, and straight away it was lashed upon rightly. His sponsors, Ralph Lauren, dropped him. He had a lot of explaining to do. He owned it straight away. He apologized. He talked about the learnings that he was going to take, but his form fell off a cliff over the couple of months since then, had done nothing until this week. But Justin Thomas yesterday, all weekend, his ball striking was unbelievable at a different level to everybody else. Couldn't hold a putt for a good chunk of that, but then about the 8th hole yesterday, it all finally clicked into gear, and he went through a stretch from 8 to 12 where he was 5 under for 4 holes, an eagle at 11, and he sort of cruised towards the finish. It's a very difficult final few holes at Sawgrass for players to try and play catch up, and he had the momentum. On 18, he stood up and there's water all down the left-hand side. I was listening to Brad Faxon last week talk about the tee shot on 18, which he feels is the most difficult on tour because you're basically standing on the water. It is everywhere you look. And he hit it right down the left-hand side, about 2 yards in from going into the water. And it didn't bounce to the left as it was spinning back there. It bounced straight on and ran on for about another 50 yards. So he had his little bit of luck to hold off DeChambeau and Westwood. But Thomas is in that mix now of probably Dustin Johnson, Bryson DeChambeau, and Justin Thomas are the 3 best players in the world right now and are contending week after week. And Thomas is just the one major so far. It's almost 4 years ago at this stage at the PGA. But he is the type of character you feel is going to be around for a long time. He's 27, but comes from a real golfing background. His father was a PGA Tour pro. His grandfather, who only passed away a couple of weeks ago, and he was very emotional about that last night, was also a PGA Tour pro. He's somebody you could expect to be at the very top, probably well into his late 30s, early 40s. So I'd expect Justin Thomas to go and win a major probably this season and win several of them over the next couple of years, because he was just brilliant last night.
What was the crack with Westwood?
He admitted himself he ran out of a bit of steam. He's 47, contending 2 weeks in a row, that the legs felt a little bit like jelly at times and the back nine yesterday. But he's just been so enjoyable to watch. On Saturday night, I remarked that I haven't seen anybody in the midst of playing their sport who's looked as happy as Lee Westwood. He looks like a man who's very grateful for being given this opportunity again at a stage of his career where a lot of his friends are dropping off the radar, that he's still there 2 Sundays in a row in the final group. Last week on 18, he found a divot off the tee, and he just had this almost peculiar smirk on his face the entire time, where you could see the psychologists and the psychology working, that he had to stay positive. He has his fiancée Helen on the bag, which is obviously quite unusual, but she seems to bring a certain calm to him as well. The one thing over the 2 Sundays is that it never looked as though he could go and grab the tournament by the balls. It never looked as though he could really go and just put together a string of 3 or 4 birdies that would take him away from the field. He was always just hanging in there. And that was the case again yesterday. He on 16 on the par 5, just hit a couple of really poor shots, went bunker to bunker. It was a hole that Bryson DeChambeau, who he was playing with, ended up eagling. DeChambeau was a couple of shots further back, so he left it a little bit too late, DeChambeau. But Westwood at 47, to have this sort of resurgence, remember, he's a former world number 1, but he's never won a major. And something I think to keep a real eye out for over the next couple of years is a record in golf around the oldest major winner. It's held by an American, Julius Boros, 48 years of age. That was during the 60s. It's remarkable that with all of the advances in modern science, that we haven't had somebody beat that record yet. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if that goes over the next couple of years, whether it's a Westwood or Harrington sneaking another one, or Phil Mickelson turning up at the Masters and delivering again, that there's no reason why a lot of these older guys can still contend, despite, as you touched on there, this just avalanche of young talent that seems to be emerging week after week. And you're right, it's brilliant to see the likes of Thomas DeChambeau, McIlroy still in the mix, because for a long time, and well, listen, how quickly we forget that great line of, Tiger didn't move the needle in golf. Tiger was the needle in golf. And if Tiger was to ever return, we would see that, but they are facing a short, medium-term future at the very least without Tiger Woods. And these guys are stepping up to the plate. Now, the television viewing figures suggest that Tiger is still the needle, that while it's as exciting as ever in America, Tiger being in contention transforms any tournament.
Yeah, of course.
And that's never going to come back.
Well, no, but that might just have been that doesn't mean that golf isn't still a massive, massive sport. I was just looking there at how much Lee Westwood got 1.6 million for finishing second.
There's a brilliant video last night. Justin Thomas won 2.7 million last night, and his caddy Jimmy Johnson's in the scoring hut, and they obviously have a sheet of paper on a table beside him that has the full rundown of prize money. And he just takes a quick look and sees the 2.7 million and goes, oh yes. If he gets the average 10%, that's a cool 270 grand there for Jimmy.
There's probably some kind of bonus as well, is there, for the big tournaments?
There is, and I think the caddy relationship for those top players is slightly different in that they would be probably on a set retainer or maybe on a slightly lower percentage at times. But you're right, then for the bigger tournaments, right, it may well go back up to the 10, 15%. But for the viewing figures, for everything, golf in terms of a corporate beast is showing no signs of slowing down at all. The prize money has held up, if not increased every year. They're coming up with new innovations to add more and more money. And we see that. That is a driving force for so many players. The Olympics are on this year. Dustin Johnson, world number one, says, I'm not going.
Right.
It's around the FedEx Cup, and that's my priority.
Yeah, and look, I think the advent of gambling in all of the states in America is also going to see most sports get an injection of cash as they look for their share of the billions and billions that's going to be slushing around. So very quickly, was there anything about Bryson that we wanted to say and why he didn't win, how he fell off?
He just never got going yesterday at all. As I say, he hit on the fourth hole at this ridiculous shank that seemed to travel about 50 yards straight down the middle of the fairway, almost an air shot, and never recovered from the embarrassment and humiliation. Ended up holding a really good putt for a double bogey, and that left him trailing and always found himself 3-4 shots behind Thomas. But he has shown again that he can do it in pretty much any course. It suits Bryson that everybody is obsessing with the distance and the power. He is a brilliant putter, particularly under pressure. He played a lot of smarter, more sensible shots, it felt, over the weekend. He has this little Tiger-style stinger at times that he can pull out. He used a lot of irons off the tee, even on par fives. So maybe we're going to see a more rounded Bryson over the coming months, particularly heading to Augusta, where he sort of put himself out of contention within 3 or 4 holes back in the Masters in November. I think Bryson is maturing into a top quality, top 3 player, which he is in the world. Had an eagle on 16, like almost a tap-in eagle on 16 to give himself a chance going into the final 2 holes. So every part of the game that you need, Bryson DeChambeau has, and I think it suits him that we all obsess and just focus on the power, because there's a whole lot more going on with Bryson DeChambeau aside from that.
I think Lee Westwood took his career earnings to 23 million on the PGA Tour alone this weekend. I think there's another 39. I don't know if the 39 is the global one that the European Tour have in their stats, but it's been an amazing career that Lee Westwood has put together.
When he'll be back playing Ryder Cup, you would expect this year. It's a quarter of a century at the very, very top of his game. And he's had some big dips in there where he's dropped out of the top 100, top 200 of the world, and has always brought himself back again and again. And having his fiancée Helen on the bag seems to have made a huge difference. She's a personal trainer. He looks for a 47-year-old chair. He looks in sensational shape.
Right.
And there's a glow off Lee Westwood. There's a glow around Lee Westwood right now. And it's interesting you talk about those PGA Tour stats. He's won twice on the PGA Tour. Like, he's had the most unbelievably successful European Tour career. But when you're watching the PGA Tour coverage, they rarely acknowledge that the European Tour even exists.
Yeah.
That any of that stuff happened for Lee Westwood. But he was a vice captain a couple of years ago in Paris for the Ryder Cup. He's going to be on the team this time.
Yeah, and look, clearly a captain whenever he wants that gig as well. You've got to tune into Golf Weekly to hear the Rory takes and see what the crack is with that. I do want to ask you about football. Nathan, and the fact that Ireland have no fit footballers left at this stage. I heard you talking yesterday after the game to Brian Kerr, pointing out that you've some experience. I said, no experience with this. I had loads of experienced goalkeepers. Anytime I wanted one, I had an experienced goalkeeper, and it's not just in goals. It's central defence, it's central midfield, and it's our striking options, all decimated.
They are, but he still has a lot of options. They're just not the options he would have wanted. So in goal, Caoimhín Kelleher, I was looking at some photographs yesterday of Liverpool training. Caoimhín Kelleher didn't seem to be there. So he's still not back in training, just 9 days away from that game against Serbia, and has never played against Ireland. The wild card now is Kieran Westwood, who was meant to be out for the game, but came back yesterday and played for Sheffield Wednesday. Westwood hasn't played for Ireland in 4 years, hasn't played a competitive game for Ireland in nearly a decade, but last month was saying, I would swim across the Irish Sea if the opportunity came up to play for Ireland again. So that's a big decision now for Stephen Kenny. Does he go with the future and a player who is used to stepping in at short notice in Caoimhín Kelleher and doing a good job for Liverpool?
If Kelleher's not fit, though, so Kelleher's got to play tonight or be on the bench tonight, or there's one last game, right? So, can you pick a player who hasn't been fit at all?
I think that's what makes it even more difficult, that if Randolph was out and Kelleher was sitting on the bench for Liverpool for the last month, Kelleher probably would have started. But if he's not fully fit, it's a massive risk away to Serbia, as tough a game as they're going to have over the coming months. When you have somebody as experienced as Kieran Westwood there, you have Mark Travers as well, who's played a couple of times for Ireland off the bench, but again, isn't playing at club level. I heard Vinny Perth on Thursday night suggesting somebody like Ian Lawler, who's a bit more experienced, and I think he's playing with Bolton at the moment and is playing every week. You've Gavin Bazunu there, who's another emerging young player, but it does feel as though it's that choice of Westwood or Randolph.
Kelleher.
Westwood or Kelleher. He's had Kelleher at under 21 level, so he knows what he's all about. And if he can get back on the bench by next weekend, I'd expect it'll be Kelleher. But as you move through the pitch, there are options. So I think the only two players who were nailed on to start in the entire 11 are Enda Stevens at left back, and Conor Hourhan will definitely play somewhere in midfield. But whether it's Coleman or Doherty at right back, both of them are starting games once again. And Coleman looked back to fitness when he came off the bench for Everton at the weekend. Whether or not Shane Duffy starts or not, it's going to be a huge decision again. But Darragh O'Shea, Kieran Clark are both playing good football at club level. Stevens will play at left back. Then in midfield, Josh Cullen, I think, is somebody who will really come into the mix. Has played a lot of games for Anderlecht over the last few weeks, particularly with James McCarthy out. Last time Ireland played against Bulgaria, he played Hourhan in that number 6 role. Hourhan scored again at the weekend for Swansea in exactly the type of goal you feel he could score at international level, playing as a number 8 / a number 10. That sort of Frank Lampard style late run into the area. 5th goal since he went on loan to Swansea. So I think Hourhan, a midfield maybe of Hourhan, Cullen. Will he drop Jeff Hendrick? I know Hendrick struggled for form this season in and out of the Newcastle team. I felt Hendrick was probably maybe his best performer in the run of 8-9 games he had. I know a lot of people give him a huge amount of stick and didn't see that. I think he brings big energy to that midfield. But that would mean not starting Jason Knight or Jason Malumbi. Knight's obviously playing every week for Derby. Malumbi's dropped out of the side at Preston over the last few weeks. Is that giving the next generation the chance that sort of Stephen Kenny, it felt as though he had talked a lot about? If you stick with Hourhan and Hendrick, or do you go with a 2-3-1 in advance and you play Cullen and Knight, and then you play Hendrick maybe on the right, Hourhan as a 10, McLean potentially on the left? Again, there's a lot of players in the mix there.
Who's up front?
Daryl Horgan. Well, he played James Collins last time out. Collins hasn't been starting games for Luton over the past few weeks. I think he started at the weekend, but it dropped out of the team. I would go with Callum Robinson, but Callum Robinson hasn't played a minute for West Brom over the last couple of months. So that is the biggest issue. Where are the goals going to come from? Adam Mead is out. Aaron Connolly has a rib injury and a few other things going on in his life at the moment as well that mean he's not going to be involved. So is it Collins? Is it Robinson? Is it Shane Long, who, again, has gone on loan to Bournemouth, scored a couple of goals when he arrived there, but hasn't been starting games over the last few weeks? That is going to be a tough decision. I would go with Robinson through the middle, and either side then, like McLean will have a good chance of starting. Again, he hasn't played because he's been injured and still isn't back for Stoke. Daryl Horgan was probably one of the brighter sparks of that run of games, came in from the cold and actually did very well when he came on. Alan Judge is a player who can play in any of those midfielder sort of attacking right positions and will probably see a good bit of game time over over this run of games. I think it's almost impossible to predict what that starting 11 is going to be 9 days out, which has got to be a worry.
Yeah, I think Doherty and Coleman will both start, to be honest. I think that's very likely away from home.
Potentially, yeah. And so is that your 4-2-3-1 and Doherty is the one on the right? Yeah. Or are you playing a diamond in midfield? Kenny, after that run of games in November, had said that he had intended playing Coleman and Doherty together at some stage. Again, when he was speaking to the fans groups last week, suggested it. And they are, arguably our two players playing at the highest level. I know it hasn't been straightforward for Matt Doherty, and he got hammered at halftime and the coverage yesterday for his role in Arsenal's equaliser, but at his best, and maybe with Coleman behind them and relieved of any defensive responsibilities, you can get those late runs into the area that Matt Doherty was so brilliant at with Wolves last season.
Yeah, and he was better in the second half when they gave him a bit of cover. It was fairly obvious stuff. Nathan, good stuff. Thanks very much for that.
Cheers, lads.
Nathan Murphy giving us some thoughts there. A reminder, Golf Weekly is now exclusively available on Patreon. Sign up and you're guaranteed a podcast every Thursday with extra episodes around the biggest tournaments of the year. There'll be interviews with golf's biggest names as well. Get on to otbsports.com/Golf Weekly and sign up now. Just $3.99 plus VAT a month, or search Golf Weekly on patreon.com. The page is live now. And for the guy who slid into my DMs correcting me on my pronunciation of Patreon, we actually had a meeting with the company and I was like, oh, do you guys call yourselves Patreon or Patreon? And they're like, whatever you want. So keep sliding into my DMs and I'm going to keep calling it Patreon